Good morning. So the first thing I want everyone to do is to join me in giving a huge round of applause to Chicago DSA. If you're in the house, raise your hands. Hosting the convention is no small thing, and we appreciate their months and months of work. So the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is raise your hand if you have heard this quote. I would not be a Moses to lead you into the promised land, because if I could lead you into it, someone else could lead you out of it. These famous words were spoken in 1906 by the father of socialism in the United States, Eugene Victor Debs, born in our neighboring Indiana. Debs was a union leader. He was a founder of the Socialist Party, and all of us stand on his shoulders and the shoulders of many organizers throughout the last 100 years. And I like this quote for a lot of reasons. It feels particularly relevant this weekend. We are living in very dark times, very, very dark times in this country and in the world. Yet it's also an energizing time to be a socialist. And partly that's because Bernie Sanders and AOC have forced socialism back into the mainstream political conversation. But it's also because of you and how we together embody Debs's sentiment. You are DSA. And DSA is built by trial and error and collective lessons and decisions, not by blindly following someone that tells us what we need to do. DSA teaches all of us to fight effectively, to think critically, and to work together. It's really difficult, but that's one thing that we learn through being in DSA, and that's the essence of praxis. It's how we collectively get stronger, and there are absolutely no shortcuts. There's always improvements that we can make. There are challenges that our structure inherently creates because we built this plane while flying it and because we're all human beings, and we're still figuring it out. And it's why even though our membership numbers are slightly down, you might have heard, we are actually more potent and more powerful today than ever before. And it's because the members before you came along learned new skills, they learned lessons, and they passed them on. They passed them on to you or the people that came before you. And we are building this movement, and we are going to learn lessons that we're going to pass on to the next generation as well. So DSA is membership-led. It means we have great power, but it also means that we have great responsibility. And it is in your hands this weekend. So the bottom line about what you need to accomplish this weekend is save the world, obviously. But first, you have to make an honest assessment. What is the balance of power outside of DSA? I'm not talking about DSA internal politics. I'm talking about what the hell is happening in the world and in this country. What's happening in this political and economic and cultural moment. And what is our power? What is our strength? And where do we need to build more power? So you'll hear more about that from Christian in a minute, the chair of the MPC, in her report. And the second thing you need to accomplish this weekend is make hard financial decisions, because everything we choose to do has financial implications. And it's going to be harder than in past conventions. We have to spend very strategically. And we have to come together to fund more work, right? We need to build our power partly through organized money, not just organized people. So you'll hear more about that from Ashik, our Secretary-Treasurer. So those are the tasks of this weekend, no small task. And one of the things I wanted to do, since so many people in this room, it's very exciting, have joined DSA in the last few years, I want to do a quick recap of our recent history. So before DSA's Trump bump of lore that you may have heard of in 2016, DSA had about 6,000 members. It's an order of magnitude smaller. Socialism was a fringe ideology. It was relegated to the political wilderness. Neoliberalism was the only ideology, not just the dominant ideology. And in this period, DSA slowly built capacity through supporting Bernie Sanders and grew by about 1,000 members during the 2016 election. So imagine how we reacted on election night. Well, it wasn't unimaginable, but when the horrible happened and Trump declared victory, and within minutes, members started pouring in. We started getting notifications. By the end of November, 4,000 new people had joined DSA. They were terrified of Trump and they were pissed at Hillary Clinton. And the staff and the NPC and the chapters scrambled to absorb the new members. And DSA just kept growing by leaps and bounds because Trump continued to do absolutely outrageous and terrifying things. Then in July of 2018, after continued growth throughout this period, we had double the Trump election bump rate when 8,000 new members joined after AOC won in the primary. So socialism was back on the map, and the neoliberals didn't know what the hell to do. And by the end of 2018, we had built all this infrastructure. We had held 14 regional trainings for chapter leaders all over the country. In 2019, we held 9 regional conferences in the spring. We rolled out org tools, which is VAN and Spoke and Action at Work, so that chapters could organize. And we had a major staff expansion because we were trying to accomplish too much with too little. So we were able to expand staff in the spring of 2019, and frankly, we just haven't stopped since then. We're continually doing that. And throughout this period, the capitalist press denounced us. They essentially, we all know what they said about Bernie, and they said it about DSA. They said we were nothing but Bernie bros. And what coverage they did provide was as DSA as part of the resistance, which was true, and yet obviously not the whole picture. Then Bernie ran for president again in 2020, and we had a huge internal debate on how to support him, and then we chose to organize because Bernie and AOC understood that real politics is not in the thousands, it's not in the tens of thousands, it's not in the 100,000s, it's in the millions. And we were smart enough to join them. And a lot of people in this room and a lot of people on whose shoulders we stand developed their organizing chops during that time. But then COVID came, and we cannot underestimate the impact of the pandemic. The psychic toll of mass death, the movement toll of isolation from each other, and even the mass uprising against racist police brutality wasn't enough to build the power that we need against capital. And many of us in this room joined DSA since March 2020, when we were at 100% on Zoom. And now we're having to relearn face-to-face organizing and face-to-face DSA work as COVID restrictions have been lifted. Since the pandemic was officially ended, we have organized 15 regional organizing retreats, again, all over the country for chapter leaders. The Multiracial Organizing Committee Institute in October and the Socialism is the Future National Conference this spring brought together YDSA, labor, and electoral organizers from across the country. And our sister, separate but related educational 501c3 organization just a couple of months ago organized a conference with 65 Democratic Socialist elected officials and their staff, and we have almost 200 elected officials in office today. So what do we do now? First, I hope that you'll analyze the terrain. Authoritarian Republicans are driving people to flee from various states across the country, undocumented immigrants, trans people, having to move out of Florida, out of Tennessee, and it's part of a global trend of rising authoritarianism. The Supreme Court is systematically stripping our rights, and we know they're going to come after labor rights and voting rights more than they already have. The Democratic Party is losing segments of their own working class base to Trump or to people simply abstaining from politics. And this is despite a shift in policy direction. Neoliberalism is no longer hegemonic, but it's still a powerful force. And obviously, climate change year to year is becoming more and more dramatic. But at the same time, there's hope. I talked about all of these things that DSA has done over this historical period. But right now, there's things happening outside of DSA. Between inflation, between COVID and the boss's counter-offensive coming out of the COVID when there's a tight labor market, workers are rising up, feeling the squeeze and demanding something better. Like with our Strike Ready campaign, with the Solidarity is Brewing campaign, and elsewhere. And this is also reflected in elections. We're here in Chicago, and there was just an upset victory by Brandon Johnson, the Chicago mayor's race, which really shows the perfect melding of labor and electoral right to build power, and will introduce new complications. So I raise this history and context because we face a fundamental challenge inherent to who we are. On the one hand, we're the most vibrant socialist organization for decades, and socialism is now part of the mainstream political debate, but we have not fully popularized worker ownership of the means of production. We have some work to do. We have hundreds more socialists elected in office, but it's actually very difficult to wield that power when you're in a minority, and we need to build a mass base to back them up. We're part of an upsurge in workplace organizing. And again, we're starting to realize it takes a lot of resources to organize and build institutions and organizations. We can't just rely on spontaneity. And we're one of the few institutions in this country where there are collective spaces for sustained collective action and even community, because capitalism deliberately isolates us and pulls us apart. And we're as susceptible as anyone else to division, especially in these times. So those are the dynamics that we have to deal with. And I don't know if you've heard of this quote, but a lot of people like to say, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. And in a lot of places, we are winning. 100 chapters in 30 states mobilized to protect abortion rights when the Supreme Court came down with their decision. We protected abortion in Kansas, Montana, and Kentucky. Delaware DSA helped pass tenant right to counsel, and Montgomery County, Maryland, part of Metro DC DSA, passed rent stabilization. Twin Ports DSA got their city council to fund an affordable housing project. New York City DSA supported a city council resolution condemning the blockade on Cuba. Erie DSA passed a city council resolution making Erie an LGBTQ sanctuary city. Boston DSA's Somerville City Council members helped defund police and direct money into an emergency response team and community projects. And Metro DC DSA passed Initiative 82 to raise the tipped minimum wage. Against very fierce opposition, everywhere we have progressed past the stage where the ruling class is laughing. They know what we're building, they know we're building power, and they are in full backlash mode. Those of us in New York are aware that our mayor regularly attacks DSA by name and does so with the help of the tabloid press. You might recall, those of you in Florida, remember when your senator issued a travel warning against socialists, apparently not realizing there were a bunch of vibrant DSA chapters in his own backyard. And in Portland, Maine, the landlord lobby used a deceptive ballot initiative to try to roll back historic gains driven by Maine DSA, but they failed in a landslide. Now, the only way through the challenges that capital is throwing in our way is honest learning and analysis of actual conditions. We do ourselves no favors if we don't. And we also have to choose very wisely our path forward to systematically build our power, because there are no shortcuts. As I mentioned in the resolution compendium, which I hope you read, the more disciplined you are in prioritizing this weekend only the most important resolutions, the clearer a message that you send to the next NPC about the direction for DSA. Few organizations today rest this responsibility on members, and frankly, few organizations even have members. They have email lists. But we're a member-led organization, and we can do no less. And finally, I've been speaking some truths to you in the spirit of serious analysis. I'm going to close by asking you all to take seriously the responsibility to fund our collective work. If we truly wish to organize the millions of people open to socialism, we need real resources. And as a member-funded organization, our financial situation is in our control, whether it's through thoughtful spending or through new income, through recruitment, through retention, and our new program for income-based dues. We need your 1% to fund the fight for the 99%. You can calculate your amount on our membership page. I encourage you all to sign up. If you become an income-based dues payer, you'll get a fabulous button. And I have no shame in making this hard pitch to you right now, because we can either give up, or we can form a circular firing squad, or choose to do our work halfway, or we can unite in solidarity and we can win. Thank you.